Hello, and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast, where you can learn powerful techniques to change the way you feel. I am your host, Dr. Rhonda Borowski, and joining me here in the Murrieta studio is Dr. David Burns. Dr. Burns is a pioneer in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy and the creator of the new team therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 30 languages. His latest book, Feeling Great, contains powerful new techniques that make rapid recovery possible for many people struggling with depression and anxiety. Dr. Burns is currently an emeritus adjunct professor of clinical psychiatry at Stanford University School of Medicine.
Hello, Rhonda.
That's so funny. You sound like a kitty.
Well, maybe I'm being inspired by our kitties. Maybe
Yeah.
they're teaching me a new language.
Yeah, they are. Well, in response to that, hello, right back to you, David, and welcome everyone to episode 233. And today we have a very special guest, Phillip Lolonis, who is a team therapist, level 3 certified, and he has created Teen in Nature that we're going to talk about, and a little bit about Phillip's history and how he became a team therapist, and is super excited about that. At first, I'd love to read an announcement that David and I are really excited to announce a Feeling Great book club for anyone in the world, supporting people in reading and learning from David's powerful and healing CBT book, team CBT book, Feeling Great. And the book club will answer questions, and there'll be exercises, and there'll be discussions in large and in small groups. And the Feeling Great book club is going to meet online for an hour at a time for 16 weeks on Wednesdays, starting March 17th, and it will meet at 9 a.m. and at 5 p.m. Pacific time, which should allow for fairly reasonable hours from anywhere in the world, from the UK to India, New Zealand, Australia, South Korea, any place in the world people should be able to join at either 9 a.m. or at 5 p.m. We do want to note that the group is intended to provide education, not therapy, and it's not treatment. And it's going to be taught by Brandon Vance, who is a level 4 team therapy trainer who has been studying with David since 2011. And Brandon is charging $8 per session to be paid in advance, but no one is going to be turned away if they can't afford even that amount of money. So we would love for you to go to www.feelinggreattherapycenter.com/book-club to find out more and to register for Brandon's Feeling Great book club.
And we'll put the link in the show notes, too. If you go to my website, feelinggood.com, and click on the podcast tab, you'll find links to all of the podcasts, and you'll also find the show notes for all of the podcasts. So I might say that Brandon is a really good guy. He's highly trained. He's a clinical psychiatrist, so he's an MD, a physician like myself. And he has a strong interest in philosophy like myself. In fact, his dad was is a philosophy professor. And Brandon did a lot of editing on my book, Feeling Great. He has tremendous compassion, and you're really going to love working with Brandon and learning from him and dialoguing with other people as you go through the Feeling Great book. And I think it will help you in your understanding, and it may help you clinically as well, even though it's not a treatment group. A lot of people have written that they've improved or recovered when reading Feeling Great.
Nice. And so with David's encouragement, I'm going to read an endorsement that we received regarding my work in podcast episodes 142 and 143.
And that was your personal work with your feelings of insecurity, and this is really important because we've learned that interesting things can happen when you become vulnerable and share some of the feelings that you've perhaps been hiding or been feeling ashamed of.
Right. So Carolyn wrote, "Hi Rhonda, thank you for your openness and the personal work you did in podcasts 142 and 143. I just want to say how encouraging it is to hear that even professionals make mistakes and can have these intense negative emotions and irrational thoughts. This shows just how human you are and that you are able to understand the struggles your patients have with their own feelings and thoughts. I would definitely much rather go to a therapist that has flaws and is human than to a super therapist who never makes mistakes, never has negative feelings, and never has irrational thoughts. If I lived in your area, you would definitely be a therapist I would like to be helped along with. You come across as warm, empathic, and skillful, humorous, and human. Best wishes from Switzerland.
Thank you for that beautiful note. And if somebody is in this area, how would they find a therapist like Rhonda?
Well, there are a lot of really great team therapists. They could come to our website, feelinggreattherapycenter.com, and gosh, there's 7 of us now. Phillip, Sarah, Hester, Amy Spector, Brandon Vance, Sunny, Choi, Heather Clegg, and me.
So that's an awesome group, and one of your brilliant and beloved therapists is with us today. And I might say we first recorded this podcast two weeks ago, and then Philip suddenly remembered something of great importance that he'd forgotten. I thought he was wanting to be kind of private and quiet about it, so I didn't bring it up on the podcast. But I was thrilled when, Philip, you reminded me that we hadn't talked about your brother and the tremendous impact he's had on your life, on your clinical work, and I'm so glad that we can you can tell us about that, as well as your fantastic hiking therapy and all the beautiful photos that you sent me that I'm going to put in the show notes. So why don't you kick it off for us, Philip?
Sure. I can kick it off. And it's just wonderful to be with both of you. And it reminds me not of Tuesday, but of Sundays, which I dearly miss, both connecting wise with both of you, but also clinically. Would just stop by Rhonda's and do a carpool with a few of us. And we end up at your place on Sunday and do those beautiful hikes, but are also clinically relevant and have changed a lot of people's lives in a matter of a couple hours. And then that's part of the nature piece that I think that helps what we talked about just earlier with Rhonda and being vulnerable. That being vulnerable in nature appears, at least to me, a lot easier than being in an office and hearing from my clients who have complex trauma or just shyness or whatever it may be. There is this added part of being in nature that allows them to be vulnerable and check their ego at the door or face fears in terms of exposure. So I really miss that. And so that's nice to be able to talk about during COVID, that the worldwide, that we're really being, in one sense, sequestered and hidden and not allowed to connect. And so that's part of nature, to get out there. It's more than ever. It's important for us to find places to be vulnerable and express how we're doing, whether it's 5 secrets or just, doing some shame attacking or whatever it may be.
Philip, did you create your own, therapy in nature because of your experience with David and the rest of the therapists on the Sunday hikes?
Yeah, that was part of it. That's the clinical part for sure. But what had, for me, history-wise, I grew up with a father who's a farmer, had a vineyard up in a place in Mendocino County in the middle of nowhere called Redwood Valley. And he would be on the tractor and there was ponds, and I would cruise around as 3-year-old, 5-year-old, and just for the whole day. And so nature for me was very important. And skiing, and it's just a way of me. It feels like I'm at home. And I know that's true for a lot of humans. But as far as becoming a therapist, that's very important, because without my brother, and I'll explain that as David was talking about, he had a schizophrenic break when he was 19, and we're very close. I wouldn't have even been a therapist. I mean, it's just like career 2.5 for me. So part of that is where I worked at other places with kids, with adults, and we would go out into nature, including in elementary schools. And I found that if we tried to just go indoors and try to work on their issues, there was a fair amount of resistance. And at that point, I didn't know agenda setting. That David is just, it's changed everything for me clinically and also personally. But the nature did help quite a bit with these clients. And these clients, some of them had schizophrenia, bipolar, that was pretty serious. And we go out into nature and you could see their disposition started to change. They started talking more. They were able to, their intrusive thoughts that they were having, or the intense voices, which are usually, unfortunately, fairly demonic at times, started to soften just through nature. So that's something I learned on a clinical basis. And then once I got into team, and seeing us on Sundays and how wonderful it is for all of us, and that you can really feel better, or feel great, in fact, after a 3-hour hike, but with team, dovetailing and connecting with nature. And I think it's a winner because of, especially with COVID and everything that's happening worldwide. I think it's something that's beautiful. And I think that's probably why it's, why you guys are doing this.
So you've worked with groups in the past, taking them on nature hikes, individuals with schizophrenia. And I remember last podcast, you talked about bringing them up to the top of a ridge or a mountain and looking over the Bay Area and seeing a lot of peacefulness and individuals communicating more clearly because they felt at peace. And then now I take it you're actually doing for clients who are interested hiking therapy, doing one-to-one therapy like what we do on the Sunday hikes in as part of your clinical work. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And I started it ironically in April. It became apparent to start my own practice. I was at the East Bay Center for Anxiety Treatment before with Elizabeth Dandino and a group. And I went into Walnut Creek, and there's Mount Diablo, about 3,900 feet. And just nature is there. And I already knew I wanted to do this. That's what I wanted. But I think COVID kickstarted it. And now I've heard back from my clients that have complex trauma, that have, when they were with me in the office versus being in nature, they're moving quicker through grounding, through feeling less disassociation, less rumination, and then throwing team on top of that has just moved them exponentially faster. And I have everyone from doctors to nurses. I was in a group with Rhonda that worked with first responders, and then corporate. And then I love working with families and kids. And it just seems to be something that really I feel at ease with, and using team. And then a lot of these people will drive from many different areas, especially with kids, because a lot of these kids, they're getting burned out of Zoom and they want that connection. And then you start to say, well, this is why agenda setting is so important. Yeah, it's not just a hike. You're going to have to, and for me, I prefer they listen to the podcast and get feeling great, and or when panic attacks, or feeling good together. Any of those, depending on what we're going to work on, whether it's relationship, mood, habit, etc., that it's not just nature, because that will get us humans more vulnerable. Team will take you to that moment in time, the specificity that you can have an enlightened moment and start to feel great and become your own therapist. And then you no longer need me. You're ready to go.
To focus a little on your relationship with your brother, it sounds to me like he's actually living with you.
No, he lives with my mom, but for the last 20 years, and my mom's 10 minutes away. And for the last 20 years, I've pretty much looked after him. And my father had passed the last 4 years ago, and it was a little easier because my father has the disposition that's very easygoing and can handle a lot of pressure. He's a fighter pilot, and my mom is a little more excitable. So being able to use 5 Secrets, and my father started learning it and using it, and it was really cool. And he was 75, maybe 80 when he started learning it, and it helped him connect with my brother. So I'd say that when he was 19, I was like 7 years older, and it basically, he's a super athlete like myself, and we love to do a lot of things, be in nature, sports. And he was in college, and my family had a business at a winery, and we were going to run it together, and we were very, very close. I was like a part brother, part parent, because my parents were so much older. And when he had the schizophrenic break, I had no idea what happened to our family. And then to see the system and the way they handled us, and they still do today, it was horrible. And the emotion that I had was that got me to become a therapist was, well, through loss also, was anger, how it was treated. And then I started learning everything I could about schizophrenia. And so, that was part of the reason why, that was the only reason why I became a therapist, because I really wanted to help and unfortunately times fix my brother. And then the team helped me realize I don't need to help and fix him. I need to connect with him and allow him to decide how he's going to do it. But with schizophrenia, you still have to have certain boundaries where, I need to protect him from if certain things are going to happen just because of the disease. I mean, team itself is not going to help overall cure schizophrenia, but it is going to help me connect with my brother and have a better relationship, and for us to be able to work as a team instead of, me battling his demonic voices that are in his head.
I get the feeling that you've got a really close relationship and you kind of stick up for him and look out for him. And I find that really, really inspiring and really admirable. I can imagine, although he was 19 when I guess he first developed the symptoms of schizophrenia, that he might have still had some pretty tough experiences because of that.
Massive. Our whole family, running out of the house naked and not, here parents, you have a normal child, super normal child, meaning, he was at college playing basketball and studying and business. And then all of a sudden, snap, now you have someone that they have delusions. They don't know what's going on in reality. And then after these 19 years as parents and or a brother, in my case, it's like, okay, what do we do? We look to the experts, and the way the system is out there, it's, in my opinion, very detrimental and lack of support. And you just feel so alone. I mean, totally alone.
Tell me a little bit more about how the system was detrimental to your brother and your family when he was suffering from schizophrenia.
Well, they don't connect. They just tell you, this is what's going to happen, and this is what you need to do. Take this medication; it'll help. And they don't tell you what's happening with the human being and how to communicate and really educate. So I had to go to what was called the National Alliance of the Mentally Ill and that group and learn from parents that had been through this. So I started going to those meetings with my parents, and then that's how we learned, I'd say the most, is through other parents, not through the clinicians. The clinicians
Sure.
It was just, here's a med, this is it, good luck. And it's like, oh my God, what do we do? We don't even know what to do. He's going to run out of his house. He's going to do this. He's over 18. He's could hurt himself, hurt others. I don't know. It was just tremendous amount of fear and not knowing what to do. And as I got a mentor, her name's Gloria Hill, whose son went to my high school and ended up with schizophrenia. She started explaining everything, and I was like, oh, this is so much better. I'm learning more from these parents than I am from the clinicians. Not saying that some of the clinicians or his psychiatrists were pretty good, but they only had a certain amount of time based on an HMO or something like that. And you can't have 30 minutes with the family. Just forget it. Just like team, it's got to be 90 minutes, 2 hours, 3 hours, extended sessions. You can really make a lot of things happen. And then his therapists by the time I figured it out, CBT for psychosis was pretty good. But by the time I got to that point, it's out of Turkington, I think it was his name. That's the CBT for enhanced CBT for, I got them mixed up. I forget the gentleman, but he studied with you with Beck.
Sterling Morey?
That might have been that, but there was a gentleman, I forgot his name. He's British, and he studied with you with Beck, and then he went into CBT for psychosis. By the time I figured that out, my brother had already had enough resistance, and plus I don't need to be his therapist. So I'd say that, and by the time, it's also expensive to have a personal psychiatrist or anyone who does CBT for psychosis. So again, all these things are available, but they're not provided to the families in that moment. And that's where it's just terrifying. And my heart goes out to anyone that has to deal with this. And so that's how I ended up, after my family's business went under, and my friend who was the president of a winery out here in Cupertino, one of the top wineries in the United States, he ended up committing suicide. And I just felt so depressed. I was like, all right, well, all this is gone now. I might as well, I started working in a psychiatric unit to support families. And right away, the clinical director, who's from Stanford, she had studied team, and the that's the medical director, and the clinical director and administrator, we started putting me in front of families right away and asking my opinion. And they said, you don't understand how much you know. And I said, okay. And they were like, okay, well, why don't you become a therapist, and the company called Telecare will pay for part of that, and you can go back to school. So at 38 years old, I decided to go back to school. And that's where I started, I guess, helping others, because I wanted to give back and not have people go through what my family went through. And I would spend 3 hours with the family. I would spend an hour, 2 hours each day. And so that gave me that flexibility to do that, because I was a partner. I wasn't a pure clinician, because a clinician will give you 30 minutes. I had all this time. And so I would navigate through school systems, through college, through whatever it was that these families needed. I would explain it to them and say, this is where it is, and here's the map, and here's the roadmap. And then at that point, I didn't know 5 secrets, but later I did. And that was super helpful, because I wasn't trying to help and fix as much, because I mean, that's what I wanted to do, is help these people.
Philip, you're really talking about, you're really talking about schizophrenia as a family. Yeah. It's something the family is coping with, not just the individual.
Correct. Oh, yeah. I mean, if you have a very connected family and a loving family, my family is Greek and Irish, and we do anything for ourselves and the family. And, that's why, in one sense, our culture out here in America is a little different than, say, if you go to Greece, schizophrenia exists, and so does in Ireland, but you don't really see them on the streets, because families, communities really, they protect and take care of. And we kind of just like, well, here's some meds and good luck. And that's why a lot of times you'll see people homeless in our country. We just kind of institutionalized.
Yeah, that's probably not the topic for today's show, but the medicalization of human suffering is one of my kind of pet peeves also. Schizophrenia is a real illness, some brain tissue abnormality. We don't know the cause of it, but it's just a terrible disorder. And there's right now no cure for it, but it can be treated with compassion and warmth, and provide some comfort and peace for individuals who are suffering, and that can be so important. On one of our hikes, we talked about one of your interactions with your brother, and talked a little about the disarming technique. I know your son Josh Rhonda was interested in how you might do the disarming technique with someone with schizophrenia who seems to be saying things that are delusional and untrue. And so people are constantly, not finding truth in what the individual is saying, because it sounds paranoid, it sounds delusional. And yet there is a way that you can find truth in things that someone with schizophrenia is saying, if you think about what they're trying to say, the music behind the words, that they're saying something kind of in a symbolic way, illustrating it with concepts that sound delusional, and yet the concept they're trying to communicate to you is something that's very, very true. Do you recall that hike and what we were talking about, the example that we were using? Because this might be a technique that people who are listening to the show might want to learn and use, not only with people who are with schizophrenia, but all loved ones, all friends and colleagues, to find the truth in what people are saying, even when what they're saying doesn't seem to make sense. It's called the disarming techniques. It's incredibly powerful. Do you recall that day?
I remember that. I was struggling, and I wasn't connecting with my brother, falling in and out of enlightenment or whatever, just whatever it may be. And he was, a lot of times it has to do with medications, taking them. And of course, I wasn't necessarily connected with him. And also the delusions of saying, well, you're this, in terms of, let's see how he calls me, what's the word for it? I kind of forget, but there's this diluted pieces of these fragments that he has in his mind. And if I use 5 secrets, it actually can connect these fragments because I'm not disarming it. I'm not saying, you know what the heck you're talking about? This sounds stupid and it's not realistic. So once you start to do that, it actually takes the person who has psychotic symptoms and makes them even more feel less connected and also unheard and angry inside, and they might not even express that emotion. But if you start using the disarming, it says, you know what, you're right. I'm pressuring you to take medications and you don't really want to do that. And is that right? And if you get that conversation going, and I'm probably feeling like really pressured that maybe I'm kind of hurting you. Is that right? And then he started saying, yeah. And he got quiet, and he went like, oh my God, I'm being heard.
We need an example, because this won't make a lot of sense to people, because we're speaking in generalities, but what you're saying is absolutely true and crystal clear, right on. But your brother was criticizing you. I'm trying to remember what it was that he was saying.
That I think that it's been a while. It's been about a year since you and I did that. And it's gone really well because things are really good. And he's very stable right now and consistent. And
I'm so glad to hear that. But we need an example.
We do need an example.
Was he saying like you're plotting against me, or what type of thing was he saying?
Yeah,
I
think it was more of like, you and Mom are always against me and not always want me to do things. And, and I don't want to do them. And then he'll bring up these two voices that he has names that they're people he knows, but they're not really, they're in his head. And he says, and you keep telling me that I can't, I don't want to do these things because these two voices, and he's specific, tell me I'm not allowed to do it. And that could be anything from something like chores to, going downtown to connect with his psychiatrist, whatever it may be. There's some type of resistance. Again, we're dealing clinically.
Okay, now let's see if we can demonstrate it now. We'll cut to the quick right now.
Sure.
So I'll be your brother. Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
And
you want me to fail first?
Huh?
You want me to fail first?
You'll do great.
Okay.
You and Mom are always against me, and these two voices in my head tell me I'm not allowed to do what you're trying to tell me to do.
Yeah, Paul, you're 100% right that Mom and I are against you, and these voices are telling you not to do it, and you're probably feeling so stuck and frustrated because you love Mom and I, and at the same time, if you don't listen to those voices, you could have a horrible week or a horrible month and not sleep for like 3 or 4 days in a row, and you must be terrified. Is that right, Paul?
What grade do you give yourself on that?
Well, I didn't do all 5. I just went to inquiry.
Do you want to finish it then, Philip?
Sure.
Let's say
yeah. Because usually I like to get a little bit feedback from my brother of like, have him nod at least and say, yeah.
So I'm nodding.
Yeah. Okay. He's not. Dr. Bird's not. So, I feel terrible that I didn't realize that how much I'm hurting you by pressuring you, because I love you so much, and you've done an incredible job of working on against these two voices. And we didn't say two voices, it would be, I know the voices, but I'm putting in there against them. And I know how you've done incredible, and you still able to go to your doctor, you still go out and do things and connect and go to church and do things like that. It's amazing. I'm really proud of you.
Yeah. And how does that work when you do that?
Yeah, it works massively. In fact, it gets him to actually settle and quiet. And so there's not this reactivity. And then we have a chance to discuss things. Now, that discussion might last with someone with schizophrenia, 10 to 15 to 20 minutes with more disarming, with more delusions coming out. But if you take the time and you have the time, make sure you do 30 minutes to an hour, you'll get to be where he'll start to be open to change.
Yeah.
And then I have to let go of helping and fixing. And there's a line.
Yeah, sure.
Because I'm not going to allow him to completely go off meds and completely go, hysterical. But he hasn't. And that's the fear of a caregiver like myself, is like, oh my God. So you would try to go into helping and fixing and controlling, when really, if you go into the 5 secrets and you give it chance, you give it time, just like you would a person with a 14-year-old teenager is a similar thing. You've got to give them 15, 20 minutes. You can't do it in 5 minutes. It's not going to work.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. You want to chime in here, Rhonda?
Philip, have there ever been times when you were afraid of your brother?
One time. So yes, and David's going to love this. So I'm glad you brought this up. So one time he's but he's bigger. He's pretty buff. He still works out. So whole face was red and he was so angry and the voices were so intense. My parents were there and I was protected. They were older at that point and I was protective. And he started just spitting and so loud. And all I did was say, I feel scared. I feel like you're going to hurt me. And within literally 5 seconds, my brother calmed down and no spitting, no yelling. It was just the I feel statement. And that's all it was. And it was so powerful. And yeah, because he loves us. But it's so what he's battling so much. And it's so hard for us to understand how much he's battling every day. We have to sometimes sit back and say how we feel.
So you're saying the 5 secrets of effective communication that we have been emphasizing therapists should use with patients. And we had Monday's podcast this week was a mother and her daughter who were using 5 secrets with each other. And that was I just emailed you, Rhonda, that we had a lot of downloads on that. And that was a very, very successful one, but it can also be done.
Well, that was the podcast on February 15th.
Oh, that was that one?
Yeah.
Oh, what was yesterday's?
No, that was yesterday, but by the time Philip's come out, it's not going to be February. It's not going to be yesterday's anymore.
Oh, yeah, right. I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Well, but at any rate, it can be also so helpful in schizophrenia. And that was the thing that you had mentioned with Sterling Morey, who
That's correct.
Came from England and one of my early students. And I had a patient with fulminant paranoid schizophrenia. And I didn't know how to communicate with this young man. And he was saying that he'd seen John the Baptist on way to the office, and he was enraged because the police were conspiring to prevent him from hanging out with John the Baptist, and he thought his sexual thoughts were being broadcast on the university campus on loudspeakers. And Sterling was very meek. He was just a medical student, but he always found truth in what this fellow was saying, whereas my impulse was, I'm going to have to raise your medications. I was thinking what you're saying is you're hallucinating. This was in my mind, but, I wasn't seeing any truth in what he was saying. And then Sterling would always find truth in what he was saying. Like if the patient said, I saw John the Baptist and he had secrets from God about the spiritual future of the human race, and he was trying to give me these secrets, and the police kicked me out of the church and things. And Sterling would say things like, well, gosh, if John the Baptist was telling you secrets about the spiritual future of the human race, I would want to know what he was telling you. I'm so interested. And then the fellow he was eating out of Sterling's hand, and he calmed down, and he began to talk in a very rational way. But that was the first time I had seen that. And I think it's still something that's not taught in medical school or psychiatric residencies, but how you can find the truth in what someone with schizophrenia is saying. And if you do it with gentleness and respect, because they are telling you something that's true. Like if they say you're conspiring against me with the FBI to have me killed, well, they're telling you something that's true, and you can agree with them. And what they're trying to tell you is our last therapy session sucked. You weren't trustworthy, and that's right. It wasn't a good therapy session, and so you could say, wow, I feel exactly the same way. I feel like I'm not your ally. I'm kind of your enemy almost. I've had that same experience, and I did such a crappy job in yesterday's therapy session, and I didn't make you feel relaxed or trusting at all. And tell me what that was like. I can imagine you're scared and angry and really unhappy with me. And then suddenly they calm down because you've acknowledged the truth in what they're saying. But sadly, so many people, they just hear the person's statements as hallucinations and delusions, which they are, but they don't hear the truth. And so it's a very lonely road, I would imagine, to have schizophrenia. And that's why I just so much admire what you're doing and how much you love your brother and how much you stick up for him and how much you help him and support him. To me, that's very, very beautiful and very touching. Oh, Rhonda. Shut up, David.
Hey, Philip, I want to go back to your 5 secrets.
Yeah. Good. How did I do?
The one thing that I wondered, I thought you did really awesome.
I did too, yeah.
Your disarm, though, wasn't listening to the music underneath.
Right.
What he said. When you said your brother said to you, Mom and I, you and Mom are against you. And you said, you're right, Mom and I are against you. And I kind of like cringed with that because I thought, really, is that what you would say to your brother? And because the way you described your relationship, you were absolutely not against him.
Well, in that moment in time, we are, and he's passionate and intense because he'll go to like a 10 out of 10 pretty quickly. If I say, you know what, you're right, we're against you, it calms him down because then the truth is there that we are against him. And then I say that, we're trying to be pushy. And at the same time, you've got these voices coming in and telling you the opposite. And you're probably feeling stuck because you do love Mom and I, but these things are so evil. I wonder what that's like for you. And then
that's great, but why don't we hear Rhonda's?
Let's hear the redo.
So, Rhonda, you're just against Philip and me.
Yeah, I know you are.
I can really, what's really going on is that we have a very different opinion of I'm assuming that you're talking about meds. We have a really different opinion about whether you should take meds. That is so true. And you're telling me you feel like I'm against you. In a way, I kind of am fighting your belief system that you don't want to be taking meds, and I really want you to be taking meds. And I imagine that you're feeling, really angry at me and pressured and kind of disrespected that I'm not going along with what it is that you want. And I'm feeling a little scared though of what might happen to your life if you don't take meds, and I'm really concerned about you because I love you so much and you're really important to me, and I want to make sure that you have the best life you can, lead the best life you have. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are now when I'm telling you this, that I am fighting against your belief system, but I love you and I want to make sure that you have the best life that you can.
Okay, what grade do you give yourself?
A B.
What grade did you give it, Philip?
Oh, sorry. I would give her a B plus, A minus, right in there.
What do you think I could do better?
Yeah, you could have disarmed.
Oh, I thought I was disarmed.
No.
Oh, you didn't?
No.
Okay.
Say it to me. So you're against me.
You're against me, David.
Yeah, it's painful for me to hear you say that because I just realized you're right. I haven't been supporting you. I've been arguing with you. And I can imagine how lonely and annoyed you feel. And I probably do that to you pretty often. Let's talk about that a little bit. I really want to hear what you have to say. I just care for you so much, and yet I find myself slipping up and arguing. And I can imagine how frustrated and pissed off you get sometimes. Can you tell me more about that? I really want to hear what you have to say.
Okay.
How was that?
I loved that. What do you think, Philip?
Yeah, that was beautiful. That was an A plus.
Yeah,
because there was the truth in there.
So how did we get to the truth? What was the difference?
Well, my disarm was I don't share the same belief system you have. That's true. But that doesn't sound very warm and fuzzy.
No, it sounds like I don't share the same belief system and you're wrong. It's kind of anti-disarming. It's just a subtle way of arguing.
Exactly.
And the music here, is the fact, see, the person, this is why disarming is so hard and such a great tool if once you get it. And it was so hard for me to learn it. I believe I was so slow I couldn't get it at first at all. But the person is telling you about our relationship. Do you see that you're against me, that you're not supporting me right now? And that's true. And so you want to get out of the words that are clashing with each other and get to the river of emotion underneath, and to acknowledge that and to see what the person is saying is true, and to give them a chance to open up and share their feelings. It's just funny to me about human nature, and I do this error a lot, that how quick we are to set up adversarial interactions with each other. Mm-hmm. And I have to watch myself all the time because I'm working on this app with Alex Clark and Jeremy Carmel, who are fantastic. And Alex is the best of the three of us at it. You know, whenever something comes up, he'll say, "Oh, it's so great what you're saying." And he endorses you, and then say, "Now, here's another way we might work with this paragraph or edit this piece," or something like that. But sometimes when I interact with Jeremy, I might feel like, "Oh, I've got to defend my territory here." Do you see? And then suddenly an adversarial thing comes up, like who's right and who's wrong. Mm-hmm. Whereas if I see, the value in what he's saying or what other people are saying, then we just like ice skating. I never could learn how to ice skate because I had weak ankles, but it seems like it'd be a wonderful thing. You just skate frictionless, and it's like everyone's working together. It's just a profound aspect of human experiences with each other. And like our two cats, we're trying to get them to see that they can have a loving relationship. But one of our, we adopted this new one who's 6 years old, and our old one who's 4 years old, who's had the house all to herself for all this time. And she sees the new one as an adversary and wants to attack her. And we as humans tend to do that same thing, and it's just a pain in the ass.
Well, let's give Philip one more.
One more? Sure.
Yeah, because I imagine the 5 secrets is a little harder when somebody's having a delusion.
Absolutely. Yes. People are afraid of that. Humans are afraid of bizarre behaviors, thoughts.
So Philip, can you give us another kind of bizarre thought that your brother might say to you that we want you to do the 5 secrets with?
Let's see. Things are pretty good. It goes back a while because now I've been doing it so often. That's that one time when I was with David a year ago, and then I used it. That's the thing about team. I used it that night, and I got him to cry. And he rarely shows tears because of many different facets, and then the medications. Plus, I also want to put a plug. My brother has always been medication, for the most part. There's been parts medication adherent. It's just the amount and how it goes and recommendations.
Okay, well, I have one.
Okay.
I have one. I'll give
you. Got one? Good.
I have one. Philip, I'm Paul.
Sure.
Philip, I understand. I'm kind of upset. I heard you applied for a job to be the police chief on Mars.
Yeah, you know what? I would be upset too. That makes total sense to me because I applied to be chief of police on Mars, and you're probably pretty resentful of it. Is that right, Paul?
Yeah.
Okay, what grade do you give yourself there?
Well, an A until I got, I still got to do an I feel and appraise.
Oh, okay.
So could you take your hand away from your mouth?
Yeah, I apologize. Okay. I feel sad because I've kind of, by doing this, I've separated us, and I don't want that. Can you tell me a little bit more, because I really do care about you, and you're bringing up a very good point, Paul. Can you tell me a little bit more about what it's like when I do these things without thinking of you?
Okay, what grade do you give yourself?
It sounded like an A, I think. My brother doesn't talk like that.
Yeah, I know. It wasn't a very good example, but what grade did you give it, Rhonda?
Should I be on? I gave it kind of a C.
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
And say why.
Well, if your brother's worried that you applied to be the police chief on Mars, I think the river of emotion behind that, he's worried you're going to leave him, abandon him. And I didn't hear you say anything to that.
Yeah, you literally agreed with something that wasn't true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's a no-no in the disarming technique. That's an error. But I think you're right, Rhonda, to say something like, wow, I can imagine how upsetting that must be for you. It sounds like I haven't been supporting you, and I've been kind of abandoning you, like I'm going to go off and be the police, some important police chief on Mars or something, and forget about you. And I love you so much. But when I think about the last week or two, I think you're right. I think I haven't been attending to you, and you know, kind of been there for you and hanging out with you at all. I've been off skiing and kind of having fun. And tell me if I'm reading you right. Tell me what that's been like for you. How's that, Rhonda?
A.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why is it so hard for us, Rhonda, to hear the music behind the words we're not just talking about schizophrenia here, we're talking about all of human beings. Why is it so hard for us to hear how another person feels and to acknowledge that rather than getting into kind of arguments?
I think it's hard to develop, to feel. I mean, I think like you said, we go into adversarial position, or we fight, or we freeze, or maybe we, run away from it, or it's hard to make that connection, or we don't want to be vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
it actually kind of takes a lot of abstract thinking.
Can I throw something in there?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. It's to me, it's about control and power and the self, and making the self, and that's, you've had podcasts on this before about the self, and it's always has to be defended, when you get to the point, it doesn't necessarily exist, but it's there to protect. And so in that spur of the moment, it gets triggered, and a person's not looking at the long-term consequences of it. And that's why we end up with wars and all those things, because the long-term part is not there, and the connection. And it's really sad, because we're afraid that if we give in a little bit, then we're going to get taken advantage of.
Yeah. We think we've got some territory to protect. Go ahead, Rhonda.
Sometimes I'm so worried if I'm going to get it right that that makes me not be able to think clear enough about what the person's saying, because I'm so worried.
Yeah, right. That'll screw up. Yeah. One thing we haven't done, and I want to make sure we get back to it before we finish this podcast. We didn't do any of this cool stuff on the first podcast, but you did a lot of beautiful things about the hiking therapy and the scorpions that you see, and the wild animals, and the beautiful photos you gave us to illustrate it.
Yeah. What if we use both of it? But I think we could use both of these podcasts. I think because this one was really about Philip's relationship with his brother and kind of working with somebody who has schizophrenia and team. And the other one we did was really about Philip's work in doing nature therapy.
Oh, well, then maybe we can just have this as a second Philip podcast.
Yeah, which would be really fun.
What do you think about that, Philip?
Well, I don't want my ego to be shown so much, but sure. I think if I'm going to throw some nature stuff at in this one, I think that's the point, is that it doesn't matter who you are as a human being. When you're out, a person is out in nature, unless there's barriers to that in certain cultures. Not certain cultures, but certain places in America, we're not allowed. It's expensive to get into the nature and woods, and it's really sad. Where I think the three of us are very privileged. I just go out in my backyard and there's Mount Diablo. But I wanted to bring that up too, because this is where the access to team, access to nature, where is that? Is there impediment to it? But these things are so important, and I can't tell you how nature has provided for my clients and made them a lot more vulnerable and effective for making change in their lives. Because the Buddha was awakened under a Bodhi tree. Socrates gave his discourses outdoors. And what are we doing? We're getting more and more indoors with the Instagram jealous book, I call it, all these things that keep us indoors. indoors, isolated, and then you throw in COVID, and the next thing you know, it's getting pretty serious out there in terms of the symptomology of what's happening with everybody. And I can say that my clients that are able to get out and they're able to do the work, and now that COVID's starting to calm down a little bit in terms of, getting the vaccinations, and people are getting a little bit more positive that we're going to get out of this, they're able to do exposures on the hikes. Whereas in the beginning, no one wanted to talk to anybody. So we couldn't do like self-disclosure or survey technique or shame attacking to a certain extent, but now we can. And I think that's really important to bring out, that just by taking a walk can really start to give someone a sense of peace versus being indoors with a mask, worrying what the heck's going to happen next. And that's a terrifying thing. And a mountain, like David brought up about the self, the mountain doesn't have a self. The trees, all these things are more of like, can be externalization of voices of talking back to the human that has all this rumination and fear and disassociates and hold all of us in a place that's more connecting. And that's what the 5 secrets is. But that's also, to me, what I've noticed and what science is also showing, that nature does bring about physiological change in the nervous system of a human being. And that's what we want. And then we start to use these powerful methods, and the agenda setting is huge, David. Not everybody can do nature therapy. I don't want everybody out there doing that, because some people are just, they're not ready, or you can see there's a lot of resistance. And if we don't use the agenda setting and the testing and the empathy, we're just going to miss out. You can't, as you said, you can't just throw methods at people.
Yeah. One last thing. When roughly, this will be toward the end of March when this is published then?
Well, this will be probably March 15th. Middle of March.
15th. Well, the day before this might be the first return of my Sunday hikes, because I've had no Sunday hikes during COVID. But I'm going to reinstate them for vaccinated folks only. And probably the 14th of March, I think, is a Sunday, and that might be our first return of the Sunday hike. So if any of you have previously come on Sunday hikes, hopefully we'll be open for business again. But you must have had your 2 vaccinations and be at least 10 days beyond your second vaccination. And then Sunny Choi might be able to bring us tons of dim sum that we can, if it's warm enough, eat in the backyard, even if we have to sit on the grass or something and eat dim sum. We'll chip in as we used to do, and he'll hopefully bring a ton of dim sum over. So those who want to stay for the dim sum feast after the Sunday hike, you're certainly welcome to do that.
Well, that sounds a good reason just to get vaccinated just for the Sunday hikes.
Yeah, and then we'll do as we did before. Along the way, I'll heal people, we'll practice techniques, we'll teach things, and we'll be kind of like the Buddha and Socrates, and Philip will be wandering through nature, trying to do a little healing along the way while we're hiking and enjoying how beautiful it is.
Awesome. Okay, well, Philip, thank you so much for coming back and joining us for a second podcast.
Yeah, thanks for helping me more with what's happened with my brother, because when it's personal, it's so much harder to connect. And what you guys did, even in this was a little mini Sunday hike to get me to talk to my brother tonight, to check in, and how David did it. It just that warmth and the connection was beautiful. So I really appreciate that a lot.
Thanks, Philip. Have a good one, and thank you, Rhonda. And until next time.
Until next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes under the podcast page. You will also find archives of previous episodes and many resources for therapists and non-therapists. We welcome your comments and questions. If you want to support the show, please share the podcast with people who might benefit from it. You could also go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski, the director of the Feeling Great Therapy Center. We hope you enjoyed this episode. I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.